Hey everyone, how's it going? Today's video is going to be a response to Louis Rossmann's video yesterday about how Malaysia is attempting to get a law passed to get DNS redirects deployed across the board for everyone surfing the internet in the country and the slippery slope that lies in doing that. I'm going to point out a few things that will help out Louis and his viewers who are not located in Malaysia to shine more light and give more context surrounding that situation, and also provide a few lessons that we can all learn regardless of where we live. The first thing is this video from Louis is precisely what we need to happen. Louis is a YouTuber located in the US whom I've looked up to in the last 8 years, and he has been recently pushing a new series called How You're Getting Screwed. That is one of the motivators for me to have created this channel of mine, because there are so many things in Asia which are so much worse. Having lived in both the US and in Asia, I can tell you the things that they try to do in Asia are precisely what the US counterparts of these scumbags are attempting to push onto everyone there, and also in Europe, of course. With that in mind, that is the first lesson that we all need to learn, is that we need to be paying attention to what's happening outside of our countries. That means for Americans, they need to pay attention to what's happening in Europe and Asia. For Asians, they need to pay attention to what's happening in the US and in Europe. There's this whole not my country, not my problem mindset that plagues society, not just in America, where a lot of people tend to stereotype Americans as pretty dumb and only knowing about what's happening in the US, but also out here in Asia as well. There are countless times that I've told people things that are happening in the US and had people who attempt to use the argument that, oh, we don't live in America, we're living in Asia, what does that have to do with us? That's not our problem. We're living in Malaysia, we're living in Singapore. What happens in the US is happening in the US. It's not our problem. That is the precise mindset that allows the people who are trying to take away your rights to have an easier time because you are not aware of what's going on in other countries. For example, in Malaysia and in Singapore, which is a country nearby, it's kind of like the equivalent of US and Canada or Austria and Germany. Different countries, similar cultural background. One of the key examples over here is the events of 2020 to 2021, where we had this whole virus scare and everyone in Asia was just panicking and absolutely supportive of all these mandates that rolled out. Little did they know, there was some significant amount of pushback happening outside of Asia, but it's just because that they don't pay attention, they don't care what's going on outside of Asia, is the reason why the whole crisis kept dragging on for years into 2023 for many of the countries in Asia. So back to this video about Louis. So one of the reasons that they use as an excuse for this whole safety and security is to ensure racial peace. So as a Malaysian Chinese guy who's grown up in Malaysia most of my younger life, I can tell you this whole race rhetoric is something that the mainstream media just uses to stir the shit pot to sow discord among the people. I speak for myself, but I grew up in the big city and I have never experienced any of the scary ass racism that everyone seems to talk about in the news in Malaysia, nor have I heard that from anyone in my social circle. So Malaysia is a multiracial country, as they call it. That is the whole premise, that they want to ensure racial peace because there's 70% Malays who physically look like Mexicans. That's a fact. There's 15% people of Chinese descent, meaning they had ancestors come over from China back 50, 100, 200 years to Malaysia. And there's 5% Indians, and the rest are various people from different racial groups. So what Malaysia has is an affirmative action policy put in place by the government for the majority of the population. So Malays get what they call Bumiputra rights, which are a series of affirmative action policies that give them various benefits. One such benefit, for example, is the fact that they get anywhere from 5 to 10% discounts on any new property purchases. So I like to tell my American friends, think of it like in the US, if they introduced a law that basically gave white people a discount of 5 to 10% on any new property purchase that they make in the country. How's that gonna work out? So I'll let you figure that one out for yourself, but at this point, the other races have lived with it and it is just part of life in Malaysia. But apart from that, there's really no hate. There used to be some racial tensions back in like the 60s or 70s, but in modern times, everyone kind of gets along with each other. In fact, personally, as a Malaysian Chinese guy, the most racist people that I've ever encountered in Malaysia who are Malaysians are other Malaysian Chinese people. And that probably sounds familiar because you probably heard the joke that the most racist people towards Chinese people in general are other Chinese people. If you speak English as a mother tongue like I do, you're gonna get this whole, oh, he speaks English, he must think that he's superior to us. And the reason why that is because Chinese people have two different subgroups between them in Malaysia, which are the English-speaking bunch, a dying small minority group, and the primarily Mandarin-speaking part, the bunch of people who think that China's gonna protect them because they're Chinese. Newsflash, by the way, I once met a Chinese person who asked how I knew how to speak Mandarin, and I said that I was Chinese, and she asked me what passport I had, and the minute she heard that I did not hold a Chinese passport, she told me, you're not Chinese. So for the dumbasses in Malaysia who believe that China is your supportive motherland of a backbone, you're wrong. So this whole racial topic is used by the mainstream media to sow discord among the people and make people believe that racism is still a big problem when really it's not. Everyone just gets together. The reason why they do that, so that discord, is so that while everyone's busy pointing fingers at each other, they're not aware of the real villains who are siphoning money out of their pockets, out of the taxpayers' pockets with corrupt crony capitalism. And speaking of distractions, there are a lot of them in Asia, even more so than in the US. And they like it that way. Why? Because everyone's busy with work and they're busy scrolling Facebook and scrolling TikTok and scrolling Instagram to pay attention to any important topics that are happening around them, whether it's in Malaysia, in bigger Asia, or the rest of the globe. That part about social media is pretty obvious because everyone's just kind of glued to their phones, even more so than America. It's an even worse problem, I can tell you that. And one of the reasons I believe that people are constantly on their phone is because they use that as a distraction from the amount of stress that they have from working crazy hours. So in many parts of Asia, people get worked like donkeys, and in many parts of Malaysia, the problem is traffic. People take 1-2 hours to get to work in the morning and 1 to 3 hours to get home at night. So even if they're working a white-collar job, that mental exhaustion combined with the amount of time that they spend just sitting in traffic, combined with their life stresses in general, causes a lot of people to just turn off their brain and mindlessly scroll their phone at the end of every single day. And let's not discount work for a second, because that is part of the distraction. The evidence lies in 2020 to 2021 when we had this whole virus scare. So there were mandates in place, some of which hadn't been around since World War II, when the Japanese were around and the British people had to do curfews and the Japanese people had to do curfews onto the people, that were reintroduced in 2020, such as the ban to cross state lines without an official letter saying that you have business in another state. There were all these mandates to put on a mask in a place where it's 30 Celsius, 95 Fahrenheit, 60 to 90% humidity every single day, year-round. Outdoor masking. And let's not forget those mandates to show your QR code to the person in the restaurant or the person in the mall or to your employer, or you can get fired. So with all this panic surrounding the entire virus because you don't want grandma to die, do you? You don't want to bring it home to your kids, do you? Guess what? Malaysia, Singapore, and a lot of the other Asian countries were the first to institute return to office as early as 2021. Keep in mind the mainstream push for return to office in the Western Hemisphere really only started last year in the first or second quarters of 2023. But you had all these people who were just shitting their pants, policing each other, and masking all the way into 2024, but they're the first ones to return to office. Why? Because the employers want to make sure that your time is occupied. You don't have any time to do anything else, not work on your side project to create some extra income security, not to do your laundry, not to take care of your kids, which is a responsibility that every parent should perform, not get funny ideas because your mind is free to think, No, they need you gossiping with your colleagues in the office. They need you to be surfing the internet when you have downtime in the office. And they need you to do all this busy work that gets discarded a month to a year later after the project has been completed. They want you to do all that because they don't want you to use your brain for something else. As they say, idle hands are the devil's workshop. Another thing that Louis talks about in his video, and I would highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already, I'll include it in the link in the description below, is that how all these policies that are used to take away people's rights come with the excuse that it's for the greater good, it's for the people, it's for the children, it's for your grandma. Don't you want to protect those people from all these scams and all these gambling addictions and all these bad people on the internet? Well, guess what? If you actually had an education system that enabled people to foster critical thinking and improve on their critical thinking to make sure that they don't fall for all these scams and vices, you wouldn't have to come up with all these draconian measures to protect people unless your true intention really is not to protect people, but to take away more and more of their rights. And another thing that I see both in real life and in the comments section of Louis's videos from other Malaysians is that there aren't enough people who care. And the reason why that is because a lot of people have this mindset where it's not my problem. It doesn't affect me. I have nothing to hide. It's not my problem. The problem with that mindset is that it isn't your problem to begin with. But guess what? The intention of many of these sociopaths is to take away everything that you have. You give them an inch, they want a foot. You give them a foot, they want a yard. You give them their yard, they want a mile. So eventually what started as not my problem is going to become your problem once that overreach is in full motion. And that's what people don't get. That's how they allow things like outdoor masking to happen. That's how they allow banks to have intrusive app implementations that scan your phone to make sure that it's not rooted and that you don't have anything installed from third-party app stores, because that's dangerous for you, don't you know? It's not my problem. I don't have an Android phone. I don't have a rooted phone. I don't have a jailbroken phone. I don't have third-party applications. So what if one day they start implementing not just software checks for the apps on your phone, software checks for the version of the OS of your phone, but hardware as well? So what happens when banks start implementing all these hardware checks and you stop being able to use the banking app because it's now telling you that you need to buy a new phone because your phone is now 1 year old? For security reasons, you're going to have to buy a new phone every year to make sure that your hardware is not compromised. Ever think about that? I think it's a great thing that people like Louis are paying attention to things that are happening literally across the globe in a country where I'm not sure if he would ever visit in his life. Because, like I said, many of the things that are happening in Asia are the exact things that they are trying to push over in Europe, in America. And the only reason why they haven't really succeeded at it is because of the culture of the Americans, especially with 2A and all that fun stuff, and the fact that the people in these countries have a stronger backbone. As much as people in America or in Europe complain that there's not enough people who stand up and there are too many cowards, you should come over to Asia and see how many more cowards refuse to stand up for themselves even though they're right. And for the people who watch Louis Rossmann who are from Malaysia, I really commend that you do so, because you are part of that group who is educating yourself about stuff that's happening outside of this small little bubble that most people have. You actually care about things that are happening outside of the country that you live in, and that's a good thing because you get to learn about things that you otherwise wouldn't have by scrolling Facebook like the rest of the NPCs out there. And while some people might say that that is a completely useless thing to do, you're wrong. Look at companies like Grab, who are inspired by Uber, which is a US company. Look at all those different brands of gaming chairs that people sit on and love to rave about. Most of those chairs, if not all of them, come from a single manufacturer based in China. The reason why I know this? I pay attention to what's happening in the US. There's an American computer hardware review channel called Gamers Nexus, and in one of the videos, which I'll also link down below, Steve Burke, who runs Gamers Nexus, talks about how he procured his own branded gaming chairs and the low-ass cost of obtaining them from China and publicizes it to the world. A lot of good knowledge and content comes from people in America, people in Europe, because they're more willing to talk about all these things as opposed to people in Asia. And that is a cultural phenomenon that I will talk about in a separate video. But those are the reasons why you have to keep your eyes open and your ears open for stuff that's happening around the globe. You don't care about America going into a recession because you're living in Malaysia or Singapore? Wait till the tsunami effect of that recession rolls across the waters and into the country that you live in. With that, I'm going to wrap this video up. Stay tuned for more episodes of How You're Getting Screwed Asia Edition. Take care. Have a lovely day.